0.
Hi everybody, this is Leanne Giffens and we're here at the museum and we are ready for our third Wednesday Museum After Hours program, the first one in 2024, and our program tonight is about Dr. James Willits, and he was an early physician and he also built an opera house or a hall. Many of you may know the Hudson Opera House that fell in a good number of years ago, and it used to be located just to the west of the Hall building. The Hall building, for those of you that are familiar with that, it was one of the banks. But the Willits Opera House was lesser known, so I'm going to start out by telling you first a little bit of history about James Willits, and then we'll get into the Opera House and his other businesses. I'm going to share with you some information that is from the Wilson County Citizen on May 12, 1899, and this was a story about Dr. Willits. The medical fraternity of Fredonia reflects great credit upon the profession, and its individual members have always enjoyed the esteem and confidence of the public. The pioneer physician among their number, a man who has practiced medicine in Wilson County for over a quarter of a century, is Dr. J.R. Willits, the subject of this brief sketch. A native of New Jersey, he removed from that state to Indiana in 1837. Now, just an aside, I find that kind of interesting the way they said that. It wasn't that he moved to Indiana, it was that he removed from that state to Indiana. His early education was received in the schools of LaPorte, Indiana. The careful preparation for his life's avocation is evidenced in the fact that Dr. Willits took 3 full courses at the Indiana Medical College in Indianapolis, from which institution he graduated in the spring of 1861. Now, I don't know how long it took him to do those 3 full courses, but I'm guessing that he was not in medical school for 7 years. From January 1862 until the close of the rebellion, in other words, the Civil War, he was in the United States service, having been appointed acting assistant surgeon. He had practiced in Illinois and Indiana prior to coming to Leavenworth, Kansas in 1865, but since that date has been a continuous resident of the Sunflower State. In the fall of 1871, he took up his residence in Fredonia, where he acquired an extensive practice, which in later years he has gradually relinquished, owing partly to other business duties and to his advanced age. Now, I find this a little disconcerting because I think he was about 62 when he retired from being a physician, and I don't consider that a really advanced age, but apparently in 1899 they did. The mercantile business, which bears his name, was established by W.E. Willits, his son, in 1878. Since the death of this promising and brilliant young businessman, Dr. Willits has conducted the store. Another son is the senior member of the successful law firm of Willits and Cooper. Personally, Dr. Willits is a good townsman imbued with a commendable spirit of pride in Fredonia's advancement from a few straggling buildings to a compactly built little city. A man of sound judgment and pronounced magnetism, the weight of his influence has always been along lines which tended to the betterment of the community, and a position at the head of the local medical fraternity has long been justly accorded him both by the public and his fellow practitioners. Dr. Willits has retired entirely from active practice and is spending the declining years of his life in his handsome Fredonia home, surrounded by the comforts richly earned by a lifetime of assiduous efforts and well-doing. He has climbed the ladder of success and is enjoying a merited rest. Well, that was a nice flowery review of his life, but let's flesh out some more details. You see a picture of him right here, and he was born in 1830 and died in 1908 at age 78. he first settled about a block west of what later would become the Mopac Depot, and we know that now as the rail yard. His land took up most of the area east of Salt Creek, which of course runs just to the east of the fairgrounds. By the late 1880s, Dr. Willits had purchased the land east of the Mound School site, south and west from the future intersection of Washington and South 7th, and built a large home snuggled against the mound, set back from the rugged street by a long drive. He would live out his remaining years there. So I have a map that shows, okay, this is up as north, there's Mound School, and then his house on this side. You see that he owned all of this property. And this is what his house looked like. Rather grand looking house. And it says, did it say that it faces north? Well, at any rate, it was a large home. I have another picture here that is a rather poor quality, but it does show this large building. I believe is Mound School. There's the house. There's the high school in the background. Let's see, the intersection of 7th and Robinson would be along in here somewhere. What's of note to me is the lack of trees on the mound. So, one of Dr. Willits' sons, Willard Eugene Willits, went into the dry goods business at the age of 16. He was operating out of the A.O. Smith building on the west side, which is today's Larry Marshall's Realty, when the disastrous fire of 1886 wiped out everything north of that building, the whole block, north of what was the A.O. Smith building. While his store and stock did not burn, much of it was damaged and destroyed as helpful people tried to empty the stock from it and the nearby stores before the flames spread. Dr. Willits made plans for a new building to house his son's dry goods and an added grocery department. So in 1887, he had completed the interior of the first floor of 2 storefronts in the middle of the destroyed block, where his son would occupy the north room with a large opera house planned above both. So while the former Hudson Opera House, west of the southwest corner of the square, was known to many Fredonia natives, few knew of the earlier Willits Hall. The Willits Opera House on the 2nd floor was not completed until February of 1888. It opened 1 year before the Hudson opened in March of 1889. And here was their ad for that grand opening. Let's see, they had, under the auspices of Phil Harvey Post, GAR, upon which occasion will be presented for the first time in this city a romantic military drama, The Virginia Scout, in 5 acts and 5 beautiful allegorical tableaux under the personal management of Mr. Long West. Admission, I think, was 25 cents. So in May of 1888, the Willits Opera House was reported to be the home to Fredonia High School's first commencement ceremony of 9 students, before the future ceremonies were moved to the larger Hudson Opera House. So the newspaper carried the graduating exercise program, and I realize that you can't read this, but what's notable to me is that the program had 18 items on it, and I think all 9 of those students gave some kind of oration or essay, and the rest was filled with music. So as often goes for younger people or older impatient people looking at a program that long, they must be thinking, I'm not sure I'll live till the end of this program. It will have been a nice program for the grandparents and parents of those graduating students. A nice event. So many meetings and town gatherings were held at Willits Hall over the next few years. The terms hall and opera house were interchanged in news stories over the time that it was operating. Well, then tragically in 1892, Willard Eugene Willits, who was the son of Dr. Willits, died in the home he shared with his parents on South 7th. He died unexpectedly in his early 30s on New Year's Eve of a heart disorder. All businesses closed for his funeral the following week. After his son's death, Dr. Willits spent most of his time tending to the business, having retired from his physician practice. The big shows in the Opera House had almost completely gone to the larger Hudson Opera House, where traveling performances and community meetings were often booked. The Willits Hall was used for many dances, socials, and church and club meetings up until 1900. So it actually was in use only about 12 years, it sounds like. Dr. Willits did little to promote his son's former business, with hardly any advertising. He would eventually close it and sold the building to O.V. Small in 1900. The Hubble department store leased the space for a short time, adding the 2 rooms to their existing 3 storefronts to the south. They soon reduced their footprint back to their original 3 storefronts. So, what happened next to these buildings? And where the area that we're talking about is in kind of the middle of the west side of the square, the chiropractic building, and then what many of us that have been around a long time would know as Hollis Hardware Store. It most recently was a meat market. It has the tin from all the way up, and it is now unoccupied. But that's the space we're talking about. Hollis and Singleton started business in 1898 on the west side of the building, just north of the Willits store, in the space today occupied by the chiropractic office. Within years, they expanded into the former Willits space and operated out of both buildings. Their former space north became their undertaking department. Yes, there were undertakers on the west side of the square for a while until it was later merged into the larger building. Within a few years, major renovations were made to the building, including the removal of the center staircase that led to the Willits Hall and the dividing wall that had made 2 separate stores on the first floor. Now, those of you that have been in that building know that there is a large staircase, and there was some speculation that perhaps that was the staircase that went upstairs to Willits Hall. But that was not the case. It had a center staircase that was removed when Hollis and Singleton started their hardware business. And I do have a photograph of when, and this would be in where the current chiropractic office is. So they have this building, and then they expanded into Hollis, what became Hollis Hardware, to the south. The front part of the upper floor was removed, and a new wall closed off, which remained closed off what remained of the Opera House stage. It is believed that this is when the large staircases on the north side were added, as Joseph Hollis had been a long-time carpenter before going into the hardware business. The undertaking department was moved upstairs into part of the former opera space. Wagons and implements were initially shown on the south side of the first floor, but later moved to the second floor. C.A. Singleton bought out Joe Hollis in 1907 and operated alone for the next decade. In 1910, Singleton had added a large addition to the rear of the store that went to the alley, making the store nearly double in size. It included a partial basement at the rear, which held a plumbing business and an electric elevator to move stock to the upper floor. And this diagram may give you a little bit clearer picture of what was happening. The top part, both of these images are from the Sanborn Fire Insurance maps of that building. This top one is 1890, and this one is 1912. Up is north, So this is 6th Street. So here we see the drawing of the Opera Hall with the stage at this end, stage scenery at this end. Here's that staircase. And initially, on this 1890 map, the building only goes back up to here. And this is that block building they were referring to. So by 1912, the Opera Hall is gone. There are wood posts noted here, iron and wood posts, and this overlooks this area. That's what this means. And here's the alley. Before I go any farther, and before I forget, I really need to credit Byron Schroeder for most of this research and for gathering together the pictures and the images of the maps. And we really appreciate the sharing of his knowledge that he does a lot. Thank you. Well, it seems that during this period of time, at the turn of the century, that there were a lot of hardware stores popping up here and there around the square, and they would combine in businesses. They would move to a better location, and then somebody would go out of business. So there might have been a number of them together at one time, but it seems like they were on the move a lot. So Walter Cantrell and Jim Wooliver had bought the Penny Hardware on the south side in 1912, and a few years later they bought the hardware department from Hess and Kisser, another Fredonia store. Cantrell and Wooliver Hardware was initially in the west half of the building that later housed City Drug. That was still on the south side of the square. In May 1918, they bought out Singleton Supply and moved into their large double building on the west side. So now we have an large ad advertising that they are going to be open for business in their new location in the Singleton building on the west side of the square within a day or two. Possibly the time will be advanced to Saturday, but certainly by Tuesday, June 4. So now they're on the west side of the square. They kept part of the second floor for a short time, selling Dodge cars from there. He later built the brick building behind the store on 5th Street for that business. Cantrell and Wooliver operated until 1930, when they sold out to Arthur and Clifford Hollis, who were sons of Joseph Hollis, who had had the business many years before. They operated Hollis Hardware for many decades until they retired, selling it to Paul Wagner. And the building, as I said, is currently vacant. So that's what we know about Dr. James Willett and the Willett Opera House. Fredonia and Wilson County are just full of many interesting stories like that tell the lives of people who were influential and helped to build this community. So I hope you've enjoyed this little tidbit of history, and we'll mark your calendars for the third Wednesday in February when we'll do this again on a different topic. Stay warm.
Get the clap.
Nancy was there.